My name is Linda Newell and I'm the administrator of Emsworth Museum. And Emsworth Museum was created to preserve Emsworth past for the future generations. Emsworth isn't a very old village. It only came into being in the 13th century when the water levels changed and the sea dropped. The village was based at Warblington at the time, and because the harbour silted up, they couldn't go fishing any longer in the harbour. The Bishop of Winchester owned Havant, and so when Warblington wanted to have a market, the bishop said no. So they moved everything over to Emsworth. And I think that Emsworth got its name from Emil, because a worth is a farm. So we think it's Emil's worth, Emil's farm, and we have a feeling that Emil might have been a grumpy old man who didn't go on with the other villagers in Warblington, so came to the other end of the parish. But when the water level dropped, fresh water springs were discovered at the bottom of South Street, so that made it a viable proposition for Emsworth to become a community. Emsworth oysters. Emsworth is built on oysters. It's famous for its oysters. Oysters collected quite prolifically in Emsworth, and obviously it was beautiful food, and so people collected it. And over a while they discovered that they could import them further into the country. They travelled well in barrels of water, and so they became a great staple diet for everybody because they were very cheap. There was a lot of conflict over it. The fishermen were always fighting with poachers who were coming in from other areas, and we have lots of stories of the East Coast fishermen coming in and taking all the oysters and taking them back up onto the East Coast. And the Emsworth oyster actually was made extinct by about 1850, where it had been fished out. But soon after that, we were very lucky in the fact that James Duncan Foster was a very precise and very clever businessman, and he built up an oyster industry, and his fishing boats became the most advanced fishing boats in Britain at the end of the 19th century. They were built like racing yachts, and he eventually actually put steam power into them, and they were superb and they beat everybody else. By 1901, Emsworth was collecting and selling over 5 million oysters a year. The oyster industry is only when there's an hour in the month, so it's September through till April. And then when the fishermen were not on the oyster boats, they were going over to Cowes and crewing for the wealthy Victorian gentlemen with their yachts out on the Solent. And a lot of the crews at that time for the America's yacht races were actually Emsworth men. One very good story. Mr. Sopwith was, Tommy Sopwith, the pilot, was sailing his America's Cup yacht with his Emsworth and Bosom crew, and they were lying joint first with one race to go. And one of the Emsworth men said, "Oh, come on, sir, do we get a bonus if we win?" And he said, "No, you race for what you ordinarily get," and his boat came second.